that this is being live streamed. You might have just gotten that little alert to our YouTube channel, Pendle Hill USA. The only faces that will be live streamed are mine and Reverend Rhetta's when she is delivering her message. Your faces won't show up on the live streamed YouTube video. Second, we've enabled live transcription, so you should be able to turn on closed captioning on your end. Third, we've disabled the public chat, so as to better focus on the message that we're receiving. You still can chat to me privately if you're having any sort of technical difficulties, and that chat button will be right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. During our question and answer session, you all may message me your questions and I will read them aloud to Reverend Rhetta. This allows us to sort of combine similar questions, sense themes in the questions, and just sort of streamline our Q&A process. So I think that's all for tech. Welcome again to our first Monday lecture and to the experiment that is Pendle Hill. By being with us, you're participating in our 91-year experiment, and so thank you. So tonight I'm going to introduce Reverend Rhetta, and then I will invite us all to worship silently together. Reverend Rhetta Morgan is a singing healer, spiritual activist, and interfaith minister who has been gathering tools for healing and inspiration for over 40 years. Through her gifts of prayer, poetry, facilitation, and sermonizing, she cultivates hope and nurtures connection in her community as a pathway back to belonging and wholeness. As a facilitator and coach, Rhetta is known for her ability to support others to be bold, heal their self-limiting beliefs, and integrate their internal healing with their social movement work. This support is essential to cultivate the powerful spiritual activism that is needed in these times. As an active facilitator in the Philadelphia region and beyond, Reverend Rhetta currently works with the Unitarian Universalist National Ministers Association, the Center for Contemporary Mysticism, the people of the global majority in the outdoors, nature, and environment, and more. She also founded and leads the Ecclesia Spirit Interfaith Community, as well as Ritual for Changemakers, an 8-month program for activists seeking to renew their spiritual connection to the transcendent and to land. So I invite us all to settle into some silent worship, and Reverend Rhetta, please speak as you feel led out of the silence.
Peace and rich blessings to each of you. From where I'm sitting, I can feel the power of the silence spilling out of the Zoom room and just holding me in this porch where I am. And I want to thank you. Thank you for that energy. I love that with this technology, as we use it more, we're learning how to not be limited, not be encumbered by the technology. Some of us are struggling. I know I have days, but I'm really appreciating that in this moment, there is a warmth, even with the rain pounding down, which I hope you don't hear. There's a warmth, a sense of us as we breathe together and sit in silence, forming a circle. We become our Zoom cathedral, our Zoom church, our Zoom synagogue. And so I want to speak into that. I want to start by welcoming you into this experience we're about to have together. I want to welcome all of you, every one of you and every part of you. I want to welcome the part of you that is excited to be here and curious about what I'm going to say. I want to welcome the part of you that's tired. I don't know about you, my bedtime is in about a half an hour. So, I want to welcome the part that is maybe a little bit sluggish. I want to welcome all your identities, the way you show up in the world. I want to welcome the identities you're proud of and you're really comfortable with. And then I want to welcome the ones that you hide. I want to welcome those parts too. Mm-hmm. I want to welcome how your body is doing and how your body is feeling. Welcome every bit of it. I want to welcome the places within you that are joy-filled and those that are dealing with grief or nurturing sadness or rage. Like, welcome every bit of all of that. And I invite you, as I am welcoming you, to allow the welcome to seep into your heart, into your bones, into your breath, and see if it doesn't just allow you to relax a little bit more in the chair. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Every bit of you, your lineage, your grand people, your families, your ancestors, those in front of you, those behind you. Welcome, 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 welcome. And into the welcome, I'm going to sing what I call a wordless prayer. Most of the things I do, I open up with this prayer. It's a way of welcoming across the ways we may experience the transcendent. Probably people in many places in their spiritual path on this call. So the wordless prayer is meant to continue to bring us all into a kind of synergy for our experience today. So I invite you to just take in the sound, if you will. Hey, yeah, hey, yeah, yeah. Way, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Way, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah, 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 yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah. Hey, hey, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Way, yeah. Ashe, Ashe, Ashe. Mm. Mm. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the dark, and I'm going to use dark or night, maybe some other words sort of interchangeably, right? Just so you know. May do some more singing. I'm a very intuitive speaker. I prepare and then I try to listen inwardly and go where the spirit says to go, which is a very interesting practice. Sometimes I do what's on the page and sometimes I don't. But I'm planning to do some singing and some poetry, and I want to, so that it is, I guess it's a Rhetta version of a lecture, which is always about having some kind of church, to tell you the truth, whatever it is I'm doing. If they call me up, they're gonna get some church, you know. But what I want to say to you is that the singing and the poetry is not meant to be entertainment. The vibration of sound, where poetry comes from, is medicine for our time. It is meant to be part of what I hope you will listen into, align with, or feel the resonance of. And so when I'm asking you to do reflection, I'm hoping that you would do that reflection from the resonance of the sound, right? The reason is we have thought ourselves into the mess we're in right now, right? We have thought ourselves into it. And pardon me if y'all on this call are not in that group of people I'm talking about, pardon me. But I want to practice some different things or experiment with some different things. And so I believe since the beginning of time, this is not new stuff I'm talking about. Since the beginning of time, we have been inspired and moved, transcended by sound, vibration, by prayer, by poetry. And so I want us to actively, I'm including in this, in what we're calling a lecture, because I really want to invite you to explore the place where your heart goes when you listen to that invocation is the place where I want you to listen from, if you will. That's the invitation. And I want you to reflect from that place. So I just want you to know that it's not meant to be entertaining, though it won't hurt if it's a little bit entertaining, but that's not the only purpose. So part of the reason we are here, I believe this time of year is because this is the time we celebrate lots of festivals of light, right? And I think there's some historical reasoning for that in places around the world where the temperature plummets and survival becomes harder. It's very, very important to remember that the light will return, right? And so I believe, have come to love and trust the light. And in many ways, some of that ancient anxiety around the dark persists, right? And so for many reasons, there are people who suffer from light deprivation when the season changes. I mentioned, some things about struggle happen. There's some belief that there are certain crimes that happen more so, say, in the dark of night, in the dark of season, right? So there are reasons why it's important, it has been important to focus on the light. The question that I'm asking, and this work is really centered around, is what if the dark were holy? In the ways that the light and the day are sort of our moral center. It helps us to find a central place of focus, to place our intention and move towards something greater than we perceive ourselves. So how we engage in the light. What if we could also grow ourselves into greater beings by our sacred relationship to the dark, by really luxuriating in the holy qualities of the dark, right? What do we cut ourselves off from by focusing so totally on the light and saying so little about the dark? Now, in all the traditions, there are places where we talk about the dark, we talk about grieving. So we can't get away completely with ignoring the dark. But I'm fascinated by what's possible. And I'm going to tell you why. So as early as about 5 or 6, I have been afraid of the dark. I was afraid of the dark. I can remember wondering, I'm laying in the bed, my mom puts me to sleep, wondering, where do I go? Would I lose consciousness? And it was a very frightening thing as a little kid. And not only that, I had a very active imagination. So they'd turn off the lights and the rug would start dancing and I'd see stuff on the walls. It was not a pleasant thing. It was a struggle from very early on, just being in the night. Also, very traumatic things happened to me in the night, in the dark. And I struggled a lot with sleep. That early questioning about where I went was only one of about 4 or 5 different things that made the night and the dark very difficult for me over a long period of time. I would say over the last 4 or 5 years, that's gotten a bit better, and I work on it a lot. I work on it pretty diligently. What I have found is that there is a connection between my own, the ways I was impacted by the harsh things that happened, by oppression, particularly internalized oppression, and the ways that look like a kind of self-hate, right? So all of those things were on my list, as a spiritual person, of things that I would work on, struggle with, and in some ways conquer over 40 to 50 years worth of work. And along the way, I think about midway that journey, I discovered that I believe there was a correlation between my struggles with the night and my struggles with internalized oppression, right? And so as I began to make that connection, I began to ask the question, in the ways that our culture sort of hyper focuses on light and then projects into the dark, lots of things that are negative. I think the culture does that, even though in the ways we use language, there is right, there's wrong, there is light, and the light holds the goodness and the things that we aspire to. The dark holds evil. It's the thing that we're afraid of. Dirty, there's lots of connotation in our language, just hidden there, about how we hold the dark. And so I wondered if how we relate to dark people is also in that category. I began to wonder about that. And in my own experience, there absolutely was a connection. And that was actually a pretty exciting moment. So that means it opened me to a different kind of resourcefulness about how to heal myself and how to reconnect to darkness, the qualities of the dark, restorative nature, the ways that when you can rest and rest well, the ways we are restored, the way that gestation happens in the dark, the way that healing, you can have an ailment, an illness, and rest enough in the dark, and the healing takes precedent. That healing just takes over, like the plant, the seed bursts forth from the dark, and then the magic of the bloom bursting through the ground and headed toward the sun, like all of that happens, magic, glorious, mystical things happen in the dark. And so I wanted access to that kind of relationship with the dark. So that is what brings me to wanting to share with you and to other folks that have some curiosity about what's possible and reuniting with a sacred experience of the dark. Now, lots of us who are in traditions where the light is supreme are distrustful or a little bit uncomfortable with traditions that do focus on the dark. And many of the indigenous and pagan traditions actually do hold the dark with lots of sacredness. And so that is certainly my experience growing up Baptist, that I was told you don't want anything to do with anything pagan because that's of the devil. And so because of that, it took me till I think I was around 30 when my curiosity won out over my previous training, and I wanted to really just see what it was all about. Now, what I found is, like I believe in any other tradition, you have a spectrum. There's some wonderful folks doing amazing things, and there's folks doing some things that were just not my style. But that was not just the pagans. That's in every tradition. I find that there's a spectrum, and then I have to sort of find my place within that spectrum. So what I love to do is ask questions, and I do my own reflection, I do my own work, and then I ask questions that the questions sort of grow me into answers, right? I ask a question and I live in that question with that question, and I trust life to bring me the people, the resources, the books, the recordings, the songs, the poetry that help me live into the answer for that question. And that's a lot of what I do in this work, is ask questions, and then I invite you into the journey, the exploration with me, to look within your experience and your wisdom and see what's there around the questions that I'm asking. So the first question that I have for us tonight, and it's very much related to some of what I've shared so far, and I think Anna is going to put the question in the chat. So what is the journey? What is the journey for those of us who find safety and solace in the light, to align with the holy qualities of the dark? It's actually a couple of questions. How might that alignment infuse our activism, our perspective, even our unconscious bias about that which is dark? So there's a lot of questions in there. And so I invite you to read it. And then we're going to take a couple minutes to just sit in that. And I'd love for you to reflect on those questions, see what kinds of experiences come up. Whether if you're an intuitive person, maybe some wisdom comes up, maybe something in a book or writing will come up that is just a response to the question I'm asking. So if you will, let's take a couple moments and read that question and just see what's there. And then we'll return in about a minute and a half. I know we're live streaming, so I don't want to take too much time, I guess, in quiet, about a minute and a half. We'll come back with the poem. So if you would begin to bring your intention back into the collective space. I'm hoping that it's a question that intrigues you enough to continue sort of working with it. Yeah, there's a lot there, and a minute won't be enough time, I suspect, I don't know though, for some of you, you may get a pretty clear image or a story may come up, right? So I want you to hold that. And I'm going to ask, I think, 2 more questions as we go along. And then when we head into question and answer portion, if there's something that came up for you want to share, you can put it in the chat. And when we go to that portion, Anna will read some of what you share. And I'll be very excited to hear what kinds of things came forth for you. So I'm going to share with you a poem. I think I wrote maybe, I don't know, a long time ago. I would say 5 or 6 years ago. A dear friend of mine says that I write psalms, So I don't know if this is a poem or a psalm or somewhere in between. Is an expression, is an artistic expression. The night is the holder of treasure, of keys, of intimacy, of gestation, of healing. Waiting is holy. Wondering is holy. Our vulnerability, holy. Wandering in the night can be holy. Every unspeakable act done in the dark has to be faced, examined, expressed, expunged, forgiven. And sometimes that takes hundreds of years. Not all things related to the dark cause or elicit fear. The womb can bring long ago memories of the sacred gestating dark. When one is in love, the dark can be delectable, a covering. For you and your beloved, you and the beloved, all of us and the cosmic beloved, where night penetrates day and day surrenders to night. And we are the children of night and day. We are the children sun and moon make, sun salve and moon medicine of night and day. So the questions, what is the journey for those of us who find our safety and solace in the light? How do we align with the holy qualities of the dark? So first we have to decide or discover what those holy qualities are, right? It requires being in the dark, sitting in the dark, and being willing to, as Quakers do so well, is to just allow the silence to envelop and speak to and communicate to and through you, right? And to notice the impact of that experience on the body, on your heart, you know. Yeah, so, and there's information and just being in relationship with the dark. And so once you name those qualities for yourself, what stands out for you as sacred about the dark, is likely to be different, a little different for each of us. Once you are clear about what those things are, then I'm wondering how those qualities, or at least in my own experience, it is for me to bring those qualities into my awareness in my work, right? As I do spiritual practice often, for instance, I do chanting or what we call mantras, where I remind myself throughout the day, especially the work around learning to love myself. I have like affirmations or things that I remember. You know, one of the ones I've used over the longest period of time is that I'm actually safe. I'm safe. So I know that intellectually, but it's been many, many years of work to have that seep below the surface of the intellect and to know that in my body, right? I'm safe. I'm safe. The world is a safe place. It doesn't really look like that very much at the moment, let me just say. But in my center, I keep reminding that at my home, in my center, in my soul, I am safe. What is outpictured in the world is, you know, I can interpret that the way I need to at the moment, but I keep coming back to, I deepen and center in my breath. I can find safety at the center of my being, right? So that's a practice that I do. So I might find one of those qualities of the night. I may be drawn to that to use as a kind of mantra for the day. And I'm fascinated by the depth of the dark, the color, the feel. Like I love sunrise in the same way, and I use that in my spiritual practice. Do a lot of my gratitude work at sunrise. And so the depth of the dark actually engenders awe. It brings up a sense of, oh my God, like who thought of this, you know? it makes my heart sing like the song makes my heart sing, to be with the dark, having done the work to dismantle all the things that were scary about the dark. What I'm left with, or what I get to, I guess, recover in such a way, is this sense of great awe about how vast the cosmos is, and how beautiful the sprinkle of stars are on that vastness, right? And so if I remember that, the way that feels in my body, if I remember that throughout the day, it shifts how I actually see in the world and move in the world. Right? So that's a way that I do. And I wish we had time to hear from everybody, because I'd be very curious of first, what are the qualities that come to you when you think of this question, and what are the ways that those qualities can infuse the work that you do in the world. That's just one. Some of the work I do is around anti-bias teaching or coaching or facilitating. And I do believe deeply in the kinds of work that I do in one area, and without my sort of conscious decision or intention to have it affect another. If I work deeply in one area, I'm amazed sometimes at how something else that I was struggling with sort of loosens up. And this is where this idea of how the dark is connected to our projection on dark people or people of color, right? So the personal spiritual work I do, me personally, is the work of recovering a sense of deep self-respect and self-love, right? So I have shifted, I've transformed the relationship of internalized oppression to a place of self-love, which means I can then love other people in ways that I could not when I was more hiding and trying to protect myself, right? That's one experience. So yes, my own journey with that. So I'm going to take a moment and just breathe in the words that I just said. Let's sit with that for a second. So one of the things that I focused on was in order to explore this relationship for yourself, you gotta know which qualities of the dark feel sacred to you, which call to you as qualities that you would love to be in relationship in or with. I think now is an amazing time for this kind of work. In this pandemic that won't quit, and the ways that many systems around in our culture, around the world, I would say, are being shook up, coming apart, being dismantled, blowing up, imploding, right? There's so much happening on so many levels. It's all around the world. So it's an amazing time to look for the qualities of the dark, to challenge the way we hold the darkness now, to challenge it, to challenge our perception of what's going on, to question when we are focused on something being horrible, when in fact, maybe with a relationship to the sacred qualities of the dark, we might have a little bit more spaciousness and be able to have more compassion, where we would kind of come to a conclusion and judge, right? It might shift things just enough So there's a little more spaciousness. So we might be interested in asking a few more questions about what's actually happening, right? I spend a lot of time talking with people who are very distraught over these times. A lot of us are, for different reasons. I happen to believe we are in a kind of dark night of the soul, but the kind that transform our souls, that we are in a kind of a crisis of birth or rebirth, like a lot of the very difficult things that are happening will prime us and prepare us to evolve spiritually, to mature spiritually. You know, like teenagers go through harrowing initiations, right, to fully grow up. We as a culture are a very young body of folks, right? And many of the things that are happening, I believe, are toughening us up, growing us up, maturing us. So we have to access more and deeper wisdom. We have to grow our resilience muscles, right? I don't know about you, but during most of COVID, I cried a lot every day. It's amazing to see how many people we lost and how much madness was going on around that, you know. We're discussing it and people, you know, taking a stance and won't move. And every day, just all these people are dying. I did so much crying. And I came to believe that my heart was starting to grow new valves from the amount of focus on grieving and my desire to have compassion. It's especially hard when it doesn't seem to be anything I can do about it, right? But I believe that wanting to stay connected was very, very important, and that it gave me the spaciousness to grow, to allow my heart to grow, to outgrow sort of my own experience of, you know, the capitalist living in the bubble. And, you know, maybe I'm a little sad for people, but then I got work to do. I focused myself back on what I have to do, and learn how to live with blinders on in a kind of sense. Well, I couldn't live with blinders on. I still, at this point, I can't live with the blinders on. So much harshness that kind of wore the blinders out and they fell away, you know? And so I'm left with a vulnerability and a broken heart, and but a sense that it's not in vain, that the brokenness is in service to. Do you know that there was the Japanese practice of when something breaks, it's repaired with gold paint, right? And it becomes a precious, unique expression, right? Because it doesn't break in the same place. So each object will have this gold in different places. So these unique expressions of both the joy of artistic endeavor, and then what we might call, you know, a mistake, right? But the mistake elevated to art and beauty, right? And so that's how I feel about my broken heart, right? The repair is the gold, is the compassion that that is growing because I'm having to practice it, you know, whether I want to or not. I'm invited by the universe to practice more than I might be comfortable with. And the benefit of that is the direct benefit for me as a sense of growing complexity about being able to hold that complexity, right? So things that were opposing, that, you know, cause a lot of dissonance, what is growing within me is the ability to have those things that are very, very different sit together and you know, be with that rather than to try to deny it or make one more important than the other. You know, living more in the paradox and understanding the depth of that complexity as the real answer, not necessarily right or wrong, but this spectrum of what is. So for me personally, it's a way in which I think the dark is growing me. is growing me up, is growing me out into the world so I can connect more. So I'm going to stop there and going to share another poem, and then we're going to head into our last questions before we go to question and answer. And I'd be very, very excited to hear what kinds of things are coming up for those of you who would be willing to share. So this poem was written with a dear friend of mine, Bennett Kuhn, part of a project called the I Rise Project, and which is another person who has some very intense stories about the challenges with the night, and we have wonderful conversations about the question I had at 8, where do we go when we're not conscious? And, you know, it's been very interesting studying scientifically. There's more information on that now about what happens when we're not conscious, I think, but for a long time we didn't know. And so it's great space for artistic speculation. So this song is written as a celebration of coming out of the place of being afraid of the night and being able to be with the glory, the beauty, the awe of the night. It's called Ode to the Night. So in the wee hours of the night, the allness calls and my joy dances like plums on plumage and colors aurora borealis like. Sugar knees bending to the rhythm of gold spun smiles, breathing in the nighttime, the sleep of rest, of magic. I am. In the wee hours, the song of songs sings me through the night, and I am ready to catch the train back today. So the song I sing moves through me, out of pores and unagreed to openings. The song sings before I can think it closed. Oh, joy of night and dancing, it makes me laugh and shake with Shakti delight. Song of songs, I bow to you. Sing these wings, I dream. Sing this twinkling glimpse. Let me not miss the delight, the shimmer simmering in my soul. The coming undone, the shape-shifting driftwood into brown skin sculptures of transcendent songs and dances. And I stand, a song, a sign of the night having left his mark on me. So the last two questions I have for you to consider in this exploration of the nighttime and its connection to bias, to activism, the ways in which our connection with the dark can invigorate our activism and have an impact on particularly racism, but I think oppression in general. So the first question, both questions, I'm going to allow just a little bit of time for you to sit with the question. And if you are so inclined, you may even want to jot down a couple notes. And Anna, this question is the one about your challenges with the dark. I shared a little bit about, you know, the fear I grew up with and was part of the sort of the motivation for this exploration and this work for me. And so I want to give you a chance to just sit with and see if you can recall any struggles you may have had, but you wrestle with around the dark. So what challenges have you had in relationship to the dark? Now, and so I invite you to think about it, and obviously anything that you think about, you get to decide whether you want to share or not. I'm suggesting that the reflections for this, that you continue to have a sort of an internal process with this. And then the next question is the one that will take us into our sharing, and I'm hoping you will share with us. So what challenges have you had in relationship to the dark? We'll take a minute to have you begin reflections on that, which I hope you will continue. Our dark and our light, they lead to the center. Blessings to you and all the ways you enter. Our love lights a prism, a beacon of hope, shines through the heaviness, lifting us, lifting us, lifting us up. Our dark and our light, move us along, born from resilience and the beauty of our song. Keep singing and loving and moving along. The heart we awaken, it grows on and on. Hey, it grows on and on. Hey, it grows on and on. So you get to sit with whatever emerged in terms of the challenge around the dark, around the night. And I hope that in our time together in this exploration, that you have some curiosity about how what emerged for you can be an invitation for you to do some work in a way that maybe you hadn't thought of before. If you're already doing some work similar to this, I'm hoping you got something that will add to that journey. And so we're going to move to the last question. So before we move to the question, I want to thank you for your attention, for the quality of your attention. This is ongoing work. As I said, I do believe that it is incredible work to be doing during these times. For many reasons and many levels of things going on. A thing that I will say as we are moving toward ending, I think part of a sort of universal concern around anxiety about the dark and the night is both I believe, our very human fear of the unknown and our cultural sort of fear of death. Right there, within our culture, we don't have many, we don't have stories, mythology that name death and dying as an integral, sacred, and important part of the cycle of life. We have in our culture more fear of death, hiding of old people, rituals of death and dying are often, they're done off to the side. Not a thing, because we haven't grown the capacity to be within and in that until we have to, till we lose a loved one, and then we have to figure that out. So the lack of some texture and some stories and rituals around death, the lack of having that be clear and sort of common expected experience of life that we weave in, so that death is a little less daunting, right? So we have that piece. And then, of course, the unknown, which we have the great unknown. We don't know from day to day so many things and currently. And so I think that those are places where the invitation to look at your own challenges, to direct the spiritual practice that you have toward resolving, healing, just being with, being familiar with, being in relationship to the dark, and then transforming that relationship to a place of sacredness and holiness. Just as I believe that this work will have a subtle impact, they might be tiny degrees forward, right? They may not be the big kind of movements we want, the systems changing movements, but the ways in which tiny movements, especially done with many, many people, create the kind of ripples that lead to the big movements, is what I believe this work, the possibility of this work suggests. So I want to thank you again for your attention, and I'm very much looking forward to those of you who want to share whatever came up for you as you were listening here. So the last question that takes us into question and answer is, drum roll. If y'all could come off mute, somebody could do a drum roll, but I'm not going to do a drum roll. But it's, what is the treasure? What treasures have you received from the dark? What treasures have you received from the dark? And if you want to stretch that a little bit, can you make a connection between the ways in which you've already developed a sacred relationship to the dark? Can you connect that to the ways that you are comfortable with the people of color? And you make that connection. And I think I want to say lastly, that I hope no one on this call makes a judgment of themselves by what comes up. We are all works of art still being worked on, right? I'm gonna stop there. Yeah, I'm gonna stop there. So, all right, so we'll take a minute, and then when we come back, Anna will invite you to share.
So everyone, as you feel led, can message me questions or reflections to be shared out to the group. A couple people are sending quotes, and I can share a couple. From Rilke: "You, darkness, of whom I am born, I love you more than the flame that limits the world to the circle it illumines and excludes the rest. But the dark embraces everything, shapes and shadows, creatures and me, people, nations, just as they are. It lets me imagine a great presence beside me. I believe in the night."
Love that so much. I believe in the night. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
And from Margaret Walker: "In the darkness is when you desire the light. If you don't have an idea of the darkness, you cannot fathom the light."
That reminds me of a thought I have about, as I learn to love the qualities of the dark, I also begin to contemplate the extremes of the light, right? Like when you have too much. So there's light, the way it is symbolic of insight and goodness and those kinds of things. But if you have too light, you have too much light, right? It comes out of that category of oh so good and can be harmful. And so I'd love to see us have a more balanced sense of light and dark, and understand both the good qualities of light and then that range beyond that where it's less useful. And the same with dark, to have a sense of the sacred qualities, but also not to ignore that, horrible things have happened in the dark. And it's important to hold all of those truths together. Yeah.
Another friend has shared a poem by Wendell Berry. To go in the dark with a light is to know the light. To know the dark, go dark. Go without sight and find that the dark too blooms and sings and is traveled by dark feet and dark wings.
I wonder if that's my good friend Amy. It's a song that she often sings. Very beautiful. Yeah.
Another friend says, I recognize that I'm both afraid of the dark and in love with it, and in love with the mystery that resides within it.
Very beautiful. Yeah, how wonderful to be able to name both sides of that, right? There's medicine and opportunities for growth and intimacy in both of those parts of the spectrum, both being in love and questioning or wrestling with the place of fear. Yeah.
Something that was coming up for me in terms, or when you were talking about this paradox and the answer and the paradox, I was really struck by birth and rebirth in the dark, and how that is so striking considering the ways that we associate darkness with death. And just thinking about that paradox was something that kept coming up for me after you had mentioned birth and rebirth.
And from that, it makes me think about my sort of inquiry into birth and death as how do I say, like, I wonder, do they always happen simultaneously? Right? Like birth and death not actually being separate. We're born into this world, we die into wherever we were before. When we leave, and the same, when we leave here, we die to this world. Are we birthing into another? And even to the completion of tasks or jobs or relationships, right? Something dies, but it's also, the closing is always also an opening, right? I don't know of a complete death, or maybe it's sort of a complete birth, right? They always seem to be intricate as far as I can tell, but it's an inquiry I want to stay in. I think there's more insight in there.
Thank you everyone for continuing to message me questions and reflections. I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of these, but I'm really appreciating them. Another reflection on darkness in Genesis. God first had a relationship with the dark before the light was introduced. Genesis 1:1-2, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters.
So beautiful, isn't it? So awe-inspiring, it's mystical. It says that darkness was on the face of the earth, or the face, what does it say?
Upon the face of the waters.
Face of the water, face of the water. So the holiness of that dance between the dark and the water, right? And the birthing from that, and Spirit moved. Wow, I think that could be a whole Bible unto itself. I could study that for years,
Many friends saying they've received trust and love and different types of wonder and intimacy, belonging, communion, connection, healing in the dark.
Yes.
Wonder. I'll share a reflection from a friend. Asks to be anonymous. My father's dark skin, being a child, wrapped by his arms and feeling safe. in a dark room, when sick or during bedtime, being comforted by him. It brought me to wanting to help the world see how important Black fathers are and their strength.
Indeed. Thank you for that share. Yeah. That's very powerful. Yeah.
When friend asks a question, darkness frequently evokes a feeling of survival fears and struggles with belonging, family, and faith. Does anything speak to you within this? And any suggestions on how to be present with this?
Would you read it again, please?
Darkness frequently evokes a feeling of survival fears and struggles with belonging, family, and faith. Does anything speak to you within this? And any suggestions on how to be with this fear?
Well, I think the first level is thank you for naming it, because that comes first, to be able to actually name it and be with it. And what comes to me is naming it, being with it, allowing yourself to grieve, like breathing with it. I often, because I talk about the night and gestation and darkness, I also talk about the power of contraction and expansion, right? So if you imagine that being with the way fear is invoked as a kind of contraction. And if you think of a contraction not as a negative thing, so right, the way that was written, it feels like, that's a sad thing in some way. I want to suggest that it is an invitation, that fear calls you into a relationship, noticing those things that were mentioned and being with them, like allow yourself to feel that sense of the lack of belonging, feel what is evoked, breathe through the fear, just allow yourself to have maybe some compassion for the fact that exists. And I find that if I am courageous enough to stay with the thing, the breathe, just like when I breathe through the contraction of having my 2 kids, the contraction will move how I experience that thing along, right? It will take me somewhere. Some wisdom will emerge that will be helpful. So I can share a thought I have about something you can do, but the wisdom that's going to be the best is the wisdom that comes to you as you courageously stand in that thing. And I think that's really hard spiritual work to do, is to face those places that where fear is invoked, where sadness is invoked. Like we as a culture, and I think it's probably human nature, we want to be comforted, we want to put that on the shelf and go do something that feels better. I want to suggest that just as we call the dark into a place of sacredness, we can call the places within us that are always happy back into a place of sacredness as well. So to be with what is, to hold one's heart as you allow yourself to breathe through that fear, I believe that will awaken your own wisdom, your own ancestors, your own spirit guides, and what you need in that moment will emerge. So that is what I would say to you, to allow it to teach you and to grow you. And thank you for naming that. It's not always easy to name a vulnerability in such a way. Thank you for naming it.
Thank you. Let's see. A friend shares, perhaps my discovery that dark times are potent with new possibilities have allowed me to conquer my fears enough to do work inside prisons where I've worked closely with Black men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah. And I'm hoping that person will continue to have a lot of curiosity, to challenge presumptions and judgments, And not to shame oneself and feel bad. That's a distraction and a waste of time. A lot of shaming and, oh, I feel bad because I had this thought. It's a waste of time. It doesn't do anything for liberation. You can have some compassion for what comes up and keep going. We got to all keep going in the hard places. We got to breathe, do the work, and keep going. So I bow to that person who wants to work in the prison. You know, I feel like it's symbolic for our own internal prisons. The prison system is an outpicturing of this culture's spiritual woundedness, a part of this culture's spiritual woundedness. The disproportionate number of Black men, the way people are treated. This is all a reflection on who we are as a culture, right? So the person who courageously wants is just like the person who just named that fear. It takes courage to stand in that fear. It takes courage to do enough work to go into a prison. So carry your relationship, sacred relationship to the dark into that prison. Carry your awe of the universe into that prison. Carry your great compassion into that prison. Carry your vulnerability. Carry the place within you that knows you will make mistakes and you're still right to be there. Carry all of that with you. And I think you will be a blessing to the prison. But know that the prisons have wisdom and spirit for you. You will be gifted just like gifts you give. So carry those kinds of things with you, if you will, if that resonates with you.
One friend shares a reflection that I think might connect to what you were saying about birth and rebirth. If I met a person in the dark and I had never met them before, we would be able to get to know each other without making assumptions based on how we each look or move. It would make me feel brand new, like I had freedom to be me and to accept the other. Maybe we would not even like each other, but acceptance is its own sacred thing.
Beautiful thought, right? I guess it's part of the work. It's part of the reason I'm in spiritual community on a spiritual journey is I'm aiming for that, to be able to meet people and not leave with my own judgments or not cut myself off or separate myself out, to be able to love, like with no end, like with no boundaries, no end. Well, I won't say no boundaries because, right, we're still human. We still have to have some boundaries, but not the kind of boundaries that are based on judgments with the purpose of cutting off from another, right? The kind of loving that is strong loving, that is that enlivens and enriches our sense of intimacy, that brings us together. So I hear that beautiful statement as sort of a vision to what love can look like, the kind of things that we're working towards as spiritual beings. Yeah.
And I feel like that connects to what you were saying about in this time of world's darkness, growth up and out, your own spiritual growth up and out and into connections.
Yeah, ultimately, all of this that I'm talking about is, I hope, influences, impacts the work we do in the world, like to work on these subtle levels where the tiniest ability to courageously attend to something, that some part of ourselves, and then that, as I spoke about that, the ripple effect of how that informs the work that we do in the world, to add dimension to our work. And we can do that our whole life long, right? Our whole life long, we can keep reflecting, tweaking, asking questions, wrestling, intending to heal and resolve, and growing ourselves. We can keep doing that. And all of that work, I think, will have an impact on the way we take a stance in the world, on who we are as we take a stance, in the sort of the centeredness, the groundedness, the assuredness we have in our stance. You know, if we stand for love, we stand for justice. If we stand powerfully in our center because of the spiritual work we're doing, we are different in the midst of whatever work we're doing. It doesn't discount anywhere we are. If we're taking a stance, wherever we are, that's better than not taking a stance, right? But as we learn and grow ourselves, we you know, I love that we become beacons. You know, we become wayshowers, or a wayshower, not the only one, right? So there's many levels of benefit, I think, for doing this kind of work if you're called to it. Yeah.
One friend shared, and this was echoed in an earlier reflection, but the feeling of being or feeling enveloped in the dark. And I feel as though that can have different implications, but for me, it just brought up a feeling of safety, and it reminded me of your mantra, and in talking about how to connect daily mantras to the sacred qualities that you yourself find in darkness. And I'm wondering if you would share a little bit more or about a mantra or a way that you've made that connection, a mantra that connects to those sacred qualities that you found.
Well, one way is just naming that sacred quality. For instance, when I get up in the morning, the first thing I always do is say, thank you, life. And I say it a lot and very Baptist-like, you know, like have a whole church service by myself, you know. It's wonderful every morning. So at night, I could name those sacred qualities, the one that called to my heart, as a way to keep those in my awareness. I bless the night. I bless this moment. I surrender into the love that the night is. You know, I am held and rocked in the void, which is endless love, right? Like finding words, like a love letter to the night, and repeating that so that it invokes, like the song and the poetry, it calls forth a place of inspiration. So I head into the night within this inspired state. I feel like, even, you know, it's like if I were taking a journey and I had to walk in the dark, and it would cause a lot of anxiety. If I'm singing, right, it will help me slow down and pay attention and use other senses, right? So that the anxiety doesn't lead, but that place of inspiration and resonance leads. It engenders my trust and faith, right? This is quality. I think I use those words tonight. In order to be at home in the dark, I have to be developed have a muscle, have to cultivate muscles around trust and faith. I trust that when I step out in that darkness, I'm going to be caught by my spirit guides, by the transcendent, by life. You know, I'm gonna be held. I'm gonna be cared for. I trust that, so I take that step in the dark. And so if I'm singing as I take that step, it helps me remember. I remember the vibration of that trust, right? For somebody else, it might be a poem. For somebody else, it might be holding a loved one's hand. It can look different for different ones of us, but it's the practice of trust and faith, I think.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions and reflections. I feel so grateful to have been able to receive your message, Reverend Rhetta, and to be with all of you all here on Zoom. Before turning it back over to you for a closing prayer, I'd just like to say that Reverend Rhetta will be back at Pendle Hill in February for an in-person weekend workshop called Blessing Darkness, which will delve further into some of the things that she has started to talk about tonight. And so information about that is available on our website, and I'll put the link in the chat as well. I'll also put the link to Reverend Rhetta's website. And one. Thank you all for being here. And with that, Reverend Rhetta, I'll invite you to lead us in a closing prayer.
So it comes to me to share a very simple song that I wrote for my grandbabies. So I'm going to sing that as our closing. I am the face of love. I am the face of love. I am the face of love. Won't you hold me in your heart? You are the face of love. You are the face of love. You are the face of love. I will hold you in my heart. We are the face of love. We are the face of love. We are the face of love. We will hold each other in our hearts. We will hold each other in our hearts. Through the darkness, we will hold each other in our heart. Through the light, we will hold each other in our hearts. Through these times, we will hold each other in our hearts. Yeah, we will hold each other in our hearts. Amen, amen, amen. Thank you.